Greetings, Internet! Welcome to episode number 111 of the Comic Watchers Show. I am your host, Matt Meyer. With me, as always, are Nicholas Osborne and mighty Mike Eakins, joining us this week for a special look at the recently wrapped Dark Knight's Death Metal. Ooh, that's a lot of glare off of that shiny cover. Is Professor Cody White, making his semi-regular return to the show. Gentlemen, how are we doing this week?
I'm gonna let Cody go first since he is our guest, if you will.
Word.
Doing real good. It's been a busy week, but it's been a hell of a week for comics, and I'm excited to talk about this one. This is maybe the biggest thing DC has done in 20 years.
And unlike Doomsday Clock, hint hint, wink wink, this one might actually not be forgotten and kicked to the curb like a sad unwanted stepchild. So, but yeah, Dark Knight's Death Metal, issue number 7, wrapped this week, written, of course, by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo, Jonathan Glapion, FCO Placencia on colors, and Tom Napolitano on letters, which I just want to give some shout out real quick because the letters in this book, epic, suitably epic. Letters do not get the or if somebody's kind enough to ever tag you in this show when it goes when it goes out into the ether, you really are a rock star. And letters just not getting their due like they ought to. But we're here to raise the roof for them at the Comic Watchers Show. So that said, big crazy things afoot in Dark Knight, the end of Death Metal, which if you've been following along, of course, things have been looking very grim for the heroes, as is typically the way in these giant event comics. But this has maybe got a little more gravity to it, a little more weight to it, because not only is everything going to be wiped out for the 13th time or so, who's keeping track in the history of DC, but it's going to be supplanted with a dark multiverse, and basically everything will be bad and evil and dogs and cats living together, etc. So it's spoilers, I guess we probably ought to say, because
big time
it's hard not to get into spoilers. So this is a big crazy comic. Lots of big things happening. It's hard to just have a discussion about it without spoilers. So spoiler warning, spoiler alert. It's go time. So we have an omniverse. Kind of building off of the multiversity map that Grant Morrison designed 7 years ago. In Multiversity, of the design and what the multiverse looks like with the 52 worlds, the orrery of worlds, Hall of Heroes, etc. Now we have untangled all of DC's continuity, and in ways that we don't quite know what it looks like yet. It all counts. It all matters. So if you're a longtime DC fan, this is like a hallelujah moment for you, probably. If you're newer to DC and you maybe haven't experienced the multiverse like some of us older fans have, hop in because it's going to get really wild. So, I mean, I guess just first up, let's just dive into the concept of an omniverse and what it potentially means. Cody, how about you, bud? What do you think about it?
Yeah, so my thoughts on it, the way I read it, was he actually managed to seamlessly, I thought, work in this notion of the metaverse as well. So we've still got
So real quick, let's remind everyone what the metaverse is.
So the metaverse was a concept that Jeff Johns came up with in Doomsday Clock, where the idea is that changes on Earth Prime affect the entirety of the multiverse.
Right. Ripple effect.
So it's a meta-narrative effect. So if we move when Superman arrives on Earth, then we change everything across the multiverse.
Right.
So we had Dr. Manhattan messing around, and that's how they kind of explained a Golden Age versus Silver Age, pre-crisis, post-crisis, all that kind of business. What Snyder has done is say, that's pretty dope. Let's go a step further and say the dirty R word, retcon, just isn't a thing anymore. It's just not a thing. Everything counts, and everybody remembers everything.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is, I mean, he solved the puzzle.
Yeah.
Like, this is a puzzle that people have been trying to figure out since, I don't know, 1985, where they've been trying to figure out, how do we make all of this coexist? Well, we just can't. We got to just get rid of it.
What do we do with the inherent contradictions or
exactly? Because you're always going to have that
overlapping
temporal paradox.
continuities? Yeah. What do we do? So
what do we do? And Scott solved it. And I mean, we'll see how it sticks and how it plays out in the future. But for now, like, I have not been this excited about the potential of storytelling in DC Comics in a very long time. It's just, everything is wide open. You can do anything you want. Let's have some JSA stories with Superman and Wonder Woman. Because why not? Because that happened. We know that they were members of the JSA back in the day. And now they still can be, and we can tell those stories.
Yes.
Like, we don't have to be constantly on the march forward. We can look back and tell stories that haven't been told. It's an infinite world of possibilities. And Snyder worked his balls off for like 5 years to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, you said you haven't felt this excited about storytelling possibility in the DC universe. And for me, I haven't. I felt this once before, and it was when DC Rebirth launched. That one shot that brought Wally West back and introduced the concept of, the Watchmen characters kicking around, Doc Manhattan, so on and so forth. And just that sense of renewal and wide-eyed optimism. And I feel like, in a lot of ways, the end of Death Metal, which, just as a name for a series, is about as opposite of Rebirth as you can get. But I feel like the end of it is the finish line for what was begun with Rebirth. We spent the last 4.5 years now, exploring and maybe making some side treks that we didn't mean to at the outset. And, but and getting off track a little bit. And there's been tons of editorial shift and drama and real life stuff happening behind the scenes at DC. But now, if you're looking at from Rebirth #1 to Death Metal #7, you've maybe not got a coherent story, but you've definitely got point A to point B. And now it's time to shift that narrative forward and see what's next. Because now the entire smorgasbord of DC history is at play. Mike, Nick, sorry, we've just been talking right over you guys. Please join the show that you're regularly members of.
Just so excited, we even forgot the intro song. I'm just going to throw that out there. Really, this is something that I can only agree with. It's a massive, expansion of the DC universe and what we've come to know it as, and also kind of like a rekindling of what a lot of fans have, fallen in love with before the New 52 with Rebirth. And it's a part of, I feel like, an initiative that is pretty broad at DC Comics, where they've been focusing a lot on canon over continuity. And we're seeing that not just in comics, but it's stretching across a lot of their different mediums, film and TV. And it's really opening up and showing what comics can do with that concept using the characters and the universe at DC Comics. And it's taking it to kind of a whole other level. And we got a taste of that with Rebirth and kind of what they were going. And honestly, I like to track this back to the Dark Side War, Justice League #40, whenever they started bringing in that idea that even Elseworld stories and things like that, like, Frank Miller's Batman and stuff like that, where it's not really in canon, but it's gotten to a point of popularity where it's pretty much canon in fans' memories and what they associate with the character. They're bringing in the ability to like usher in all of these stories into just one big DC universe. And I think this is kind of the culmination of that effort and the kind of the punch that you get from being able to open up the DC universe like this. Like, this is what it's all leading to. And I think, now it's like Cody said, it's not all just about what's coming in the future. And I guess that's what's so exciting about it is it's not a linear path forward like this. There's so much you can do with it. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just an exciting time, I guess. I mean, we'll get into the end of the Dark Knight's Death Metal and everything, but it's obviously like what's coming next. There's so
Yeah.
much that's coming, but that doesn't mean what's ahead of these characters. It can mean what's been in their past and, you know, what's going on right now and what's going on in the future. Just huge stuff at DC.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, if I can just say real quick before we finally let Mike get a word in, is that what we're seeing with Future State that started shipping this week, and of course we talked about that a couple episodes ago. What we're seeing with Future State and just that vast array of possibilities that is inherent to that project for the next couple of months is, I think, just kind of like a taster of the possibilities that are getting opened up by the end of death metal. But Mike, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone in internet land. No, I think this is good.
That's my line.
I think what Cody said perfect is that ripple effect, and I want to say it was an issue 4 where Prime and Wonder Woman were talking, and Wonder Woman convinces Prime to join the fight. You know, your multiverse doesn't have to, you know, to better the next multiverse to win. You know, we can all kind of coexist together. Why can't we? You know, and I think that's the great thing about kind of what death metal represents is, you know, everything is on the table. Why can't we have JSA with original characters? Why can't, you know, why does it always have to be a retcon? Why do we always have to? Well, now we don't have to start over because, you know, Scott Snyder has, you know, showed that testicular fortitude and going, you know what? Why not? Why can't we do this? And this was great. And because it's just at the right time, you know, you guys mentioned Future State already. You know, why can't everything coexist? Why can't Elseworlds just be normal? You know, and instead of just going, oh, we have to restart. Oh, we have to redo this. Well, we don't have to redo this because it's here. You know, Scott Snyder, and company just opened up this whole box of DC goodies. And now the world is DC's playground, you know? And we talked about this a little bit on our Future State show where, you know, I feel great for DC right now after all the personnel shifts and after all the, I want to say damaging, you know, layoffs. It could be damaging, you know, depending on people's, you know, circumstances and whatnot. But, you know,
laid off, it's quite damaging.
It is. But it's like, I mean, this comes at a great time for comic-wise on DC, you know, just with the ending, going into Future State, and literally just having everything on the table. It's exciting. And as someone that doesn't read a lot of DC, I'm super stoked, you know? My avatar is Superman. That's never happened before. Go figure. So, yeah, I mean, get excited, you know, even if you don't read a lot of DC, hop on the death metal, you know, bandwagon and, you know, buckle up because it's gonna be an enjoyable ride for sure.
Oh yeah. So moving on to some of the like more detailed stuff in the issue itself. You know, we've got a lot of metatextual things happening within the issue itself, not just the end and the setup for what's to come. Specifically speaking, when Wonder Woman is charged with the anti-crisis energy, you know, and she's fighting the Darkest Night, aka the Batman What Laughs, and they're, you know, they've ascended to past godhood, they're primordial forces, for lack of a better term, and they're battling through time and the multiverse and this, that, and the other space, and you know, they wind up at the beginning of everything, and here comes this hand, you know, through it, and of course, the beginning of everything. It's really weird. The hand, of course, as you know, DC continuity buffs know, is Krona from the Owens, who reaches back in time, and this was, of course, way back in Green Lantern number 40 in the Silver Age. This is explained. He reached back in time, trying to learn the origin of everything, and you know, he unintentionally begins the multiverse. Well, now the hand is one of Perpetua's race, and there's a lot of verbiage that is used with this hand and what it represents, and what it represents is other writers, other editors, fans, etc. I mean, you could almost pick your metaphor, right, with what the hand represents, like making changes to the story, and but it's never overwrought, you know. What are you guys' thoughts on the hands?
Yeah, the hands are kind of an interesting concept because it feels like it was the creative team taking things just one step back each time, because you have the source wall for a little while, then the source wall is shattered and you get Perpetua that comes out of it, and then you start to see the Batman Who Laughs gets up to this level where they're fighting, and then there are hands that are above them that kind of control a little bit more, and the visualization, I think, is what really gets all the metaphors going in your head, because it's quite literally just some hands, and it's not like it's a body or anything that you can really put a face to. We'll get to that, but for the most part that we see them, it's just hands.
Yeah,
and I think that's an interesting choice that you can really only do in the comics medium like this. I feel like it's just an example of what like this medium allows, because it works on such a meta level. Like Matt said, you can kind of pick out your metaphor on who it is. And I kind of got the feeling that it was like they always describe the tapestry of comics, and it even comes up in the books. And it feels like that tapestry that's unfolding that is constantly being interjected by these hands. And it feels like those of the creators who kind of actually have their hands on the characters and get to like play with the toys at DC Comics before they put them back, and somebody else can come and add their stuff to the tapestry. And I really love that. I think it's great, and it's something that makes it worth reading again, and it gives it a depth. So when you go over it, you kind of pick up more things on it. And it was a great concept to help sell just how grand this story is, I guess, and what it means for like the mechanics of how the DC universe operates. Because like you got to have something when you're talking on like this level of things. It's not just like a catastrophic Earth story where like something's going to explode Earth. This is something way bigger that's a little harder to wrap your head around. Maybe people who are well versed in comics are kind of more familiar with this concept and can expand on it like this. But if you're just coming into this story, it is like some pretty intense like comics terminology. And I think the hands help to give a definitive mechanism for how this is working and what it can mean in the future.
Yeah,
I think to that like one of
Mike,
the
go ahead, Cody.
Oh, sorry. I think to that point, like one of the beautiful things about this series is that yes, it's dealing with some really high level, high thinking concepts, but also you've got a chainsaw of truth. You've got Lobo running around hanging out in the fifth dimension. Like
and that is one of the funniest things I've ever read.
Yeah.
Is Lobo slaughtering his way through the fifth dimension.
Right? So I mean, like, while yes, like, this is a very heady book, this isn't Doomsday Clock. This isn't a very grim and serious book. This is a book that recognizes that, yeah, I can do some really smart stuff and still be a classic superhero banger.
It has a Batman Tyrannosaurus Rex. Okay, I mean,
yes,
that's
he was practicing throwing batarangs.
Like, his arms are little.
Like that's a hard line to walk. I feel like that was
it is
masterfully
absolutely
done. Yeah. Like, there were points where because I reread 1 through 6 before 7 came out, and I was laying in bed next to my wife, and I just started laughing uncontrollably. She's like, "What are you laughing at?" Sergeant Rock is hilarious. That's what. And she's like, "Yes, he is. I love Sergeant Rock." And that's it. It was just like, this is great. This is wonderful.
Yeah, like so many just fan moments like that where you can just have a lot of fun with it. And I think that helps to contrast those heavy themes that are happening where it still makes it just a lot of fun to read.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, if I'm just comparing series, this versus the original Metal, I feel like this winds up being stronger because the original series maybe leaned a little bit too far into the wild and crazy over the top concepts towards the end. And it's still a good series. Don't get me wrong. I love, heart metal. And but yeah, Death Metal was just what an event comic should feel like to me. You know, it's 7 issues. It's not 12 that are spread out over 15 or 16 months. I mean, all of the issues shipped on time. They took the skip month in September, but other than that, you know, no, there was nothing that was late. There were tie-ins. You don't have to read the tie-ins, although they're all pretty high quality for the most part, and they really do enhance the story in measurable ways. But again, if you don't want to read all that shit, just stick to the 7 issues and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, I think there's even a point, isn't it like issue 3 that they tell you like this is the point where there's a few tie-ins that you want to jump into?
Yeah.
And then in issue 4, there's like a whole page where Sergeant Rock, like in the middle of this fight, is like explaining it, or is like getting it explained to. He's like, you got to stop with this, and then they go on into the story, and it's like,
yeah, it's where it breaks off, I believe, for the Trinity War one shot.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's just a fun moment. Like if you haven't read those tie-ins, it kind of makes you want to go back to read them more because it gives a little bit more insight to it. But it plays into that meta feel of like the creative team knows that this is a comic book series, a comic book event. And there's so many times where it plays to the comics medium that you can be like, like you can only do something like this page of Sergeant Rock making that joke about stopping explaining the tie-in.
Sergeant Rock's limbless torso.
Yeah. Like you can't do that anywhere else, and it's just a ton of fun.
Yeah. Well, just the fact that they included characters like Jonah Hex and Sergeant Rock, you know?
That was dangerous. Yeah, because now I'm on a Jonah Hex binge after seeing that. And like I love stuff like that. Yeah.
Jonah Hex is awesome.
Yeah. And it's like when a book makes you, when it's that good where you're just like, I want to hang out with these characters more. Like that's a sign of something cool.
Definitely. So Mike, how about you? Thoughts? Yeah,
I'm Dark Knight.
You were like talky last week, and this week you're like meh.
I'm just waiting my turn. My buzzer.
Okay.
My buzzer's
All right.
I'm kidding. No, I think one of the funnest things that I had while reading this is there was hard answers as to kind of what's what, but there was a lot of things such as the hands kind of being left up to reader interpretation and kind of molding it to what you almost want it to be, you know, kind of like Wonder Woman and her way she went on about kind of getting everything done and everything, especially what I mentioned earlier about her and Prime and everything, especially the battle with the Blackest Night. There was just a lot of small, tiny things that kind of made you, I want to say look on the inside. I don't want to go that deep, but really just had you, oh, there's a cat. And just really made you, yeah, there he is. Just made you kind of just sit back and go, this comic is fun. It has some, some funny, quick pokes, and then it's out, and then you won't see nothing really kind of humorous again for a couple pages or another issue. But like you said, Lobo, doing Lobo things, and then, the Batman and Jarro, like I think it was in issue 1 where, the editor's note, see Justice League, why, how Jarro came about, or don't make up your own reasoning. It was stuff like that made it light and fun to where just when you were like, wow, this is getting really deep, who are the hands? What do the hands mean? And then you're going, oh, wait, Lobo's killing space people. This is awesome. Back to the hands, But yeah, no, this was good. And what I ultimately think this is going to be, especially in the collected version, is folks are going to talk more about death metal than its predecessor, and being kind of like the I Ching that kind of maybe not really started it off, but definitely put DC in that realm of, okay, maybe the change is real, and I'm not talking about a comic character dying or whatever, but just different storytelling, different ways to tell a story. It doesn't always have to be the Green Lantern doing Green Lantern things, and he'll get summoned back to Oa, get yelled at, and then go back to Earth, and that's the end of the Green Lantern comic. Green Lantern can do other stuff, and Batman, and just come in with, back to the Justice League and stuff. So it just had really good feel throughout, every single issue. Me and Matt we were talking about this earlier. There's really not a bad issue in this series. I mean, there's just not. I'm not trying to do fanboy lip service, but it's just good, from the lettering, from the art, from just everything. It's good.
Yeah,
we've got a comment here that I just really want to read. This is pretty funny. It's from Dean, and he says, "I was here for metal, horns up, but saw the gray cat and was here for her. I'm no longer here. Hashtag Lobo is the shit, and I love him. Peace." Well, Dean, thank you.
That's
my
awesome.
cat Sterling appreciates it. I want to just for a second, talk about what this book represents for Scott Snyder, though, because if you really want to tease this thing out, the story that culminates in Death Metal goes all the way back to the beginning of his Batman run in 2011 in New 52. It all starts there.
Yep.
Right.
And it's amazing to think that, and somewhat mind-blowing. But I mean, back and I'm sure, Scott Snyder is pretty awesome, but I don't think he was literally plotting a decade out. But he is smart enough to be able to plant seeds and see where they go. And so, seeds that are planted in his Batman run lead to Metal. And then that leads into Justice League No Justice, which of course was then Justice League, and then Death Metal. And I don't think anybody has ever had such a interconnected run of things that on paper maybe shouldn't fit together, but then do. I mean, Cody, tell me I'm wrong. But
I hear that this is what Jeff Lemire does in his Black Hammer universe. I just haven't gotten there.
Okay.
But I mean, if you're in the discussion with Jeff Lemire, you know that you are already in an elite category of writing.
Yes.
Speaking of elite categories of writing.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Comic Watchers Show is so proud to have the author himself, Scott Snyder, joining us. Scott, thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure. Good to be back with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, we're humbled and honored. And yeah, you jumped in right as we were done talking about Death Metal, so I don't know what we're gonna talk about that. I guess vampires or something. But no, thank you so much for dropping in. I know you got a hectic schedule, so
yeah, I'm taking my mom-in-law to the airport in like half an hour or so.
Okay.
Sorry, I only have like 20 minutes, but I really, really wanted to jump on and say thank you for paying such attention to the event and to everybody, that follows you guys. It's been so supportive, and it really means a lot to be able to have done this one, to go out on a note we're really proud of, like this in our own kind of crazy way.
Well, yeah, we were actually just talking as you were jumping in about how this issue 7 that just shipped this week is like literally the culmination of 10 years worth of story that started in New 52 with Batman #1. I mean, holy crap, that's mind blowing.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I think it sums up. I mean, when we did the first Metal, it was funny because, it was kind of a test where we weren't sure that people would be into it. Greg and I had been pretty controlled on Batman, and our feeling was if we get back together, we wanted to do something that allowed us to surprise people and go cosmic. And we hadn't used any characters really outside the Batman mythos, except, Superman and Wonder Woman in very brief cameos. So the ability to do something, the freedom to do something that would be like Infinity Gauntlet or Secret Invasion, or that harken back to that kind of old Len Wein, Starlin kind of grand lunatic event, that had that bombast and over the top fun, was something we were nervous about, but we felt like if we made it really personal, it would work. And so that one was small. It was kind of about Batman looking around and suddenly for the first time only seeing dark reflections of himself and all the ways that, only the ways that he was going to fail, and how his friends and how his kind of his ability to imagine past it is something that allowed him to get through and save everything. And that, for me, it was a personal story about how comics have helped me through some dark times in life. But with Death Metal, we knew we wanted to do something, and I pitched kind of the bones of it back when we pitched Metal, which was, look, if this works, then in a couple years I'll build a story on Justice League. Josh will build some on Odyssey and Flash, and James will build it over in Justice League Dark and Legion of Doom, and we had a couple other things planned as well with other writers that didn't happen. But ultimately, we were going to build this kind of scaffolding that would build to a event that would be kind of like metal but on steroids, and instead of being inward looking, would be outward and be very much about all the things that we as a team love about comics, and would also be prescriptive. It would be sort of, in 10 years of DC and just in the industry, kind of our deep beliefs about, what we need to do to kind of move forward in a good way, which for us has to do with really, instead of making every event or every moment more important than the last one, and cutting ties with history, kind of not thinking about long-term readership for the future, but doing everything that's about now gimmick, or just now disregard, whatever's happening outside of it. It felt indicative of, or at least that idea felt indicative of some of the things that you're hearing in the real world as well. Think of yourself, think of the people around you, forget about people unlike you or the next generation of people, all that stuff. And so we felt we would do this event that would be about how comics is about understanding you're part of one great generational community, and looking back and making all those stories real again, good, bad, ugly. You'd reckon with them and make them, celebrate them for everything. And in doing so, you'd be able to move forward in a way that would expand the boundaries of our own storytelling at DC itself and make something new. So that was always the plan. And I think, we were just really proud of what it stood for. And we tried with every supplementary piece of material for it too. Like, for example, the special that I did with Jeff, Jeff and I never have gotten to work together before. We tried a couple of times and schedules didn't match up, where we were going to do a crossover with Batman and Justice League, actually, at one point, where it was going to be like Batman versus Justice League and all kinds of fun stuff, but we just couldn't make it happen. And, we had our ups and downs as creators also, I think, and it was a crazy environment. And sometimes we were at odds and sometimes we were really on the same side, but ultimately the point of approaching him, and we haven't really been in touch much in the last year or two because he's been doing his other things with television, was to be like, it would be a really nice, I thought, gesture to say goodbye to one era of DC while passing the torch, and in a celebratory way, to the next one, and saying it's all about carrying forward the values that made, some of the stuff that he did, that other people did, that I hopefully did in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, memorable in any way, but allowing the next readership and a group of creators to have their own generation of stories. And so that was important. At the same time, doing something like, the last stories, well, you invite back all these kind of giants that have worked on characters like Mark Waid, Gail Simone, Jeff Lemire, and then, for also bringing in new talent on the War of the Multiverse ones, like Shea Grayson, Regine Sawyer, people that are kind of on the up and up, like Kyle Higgins and Mags. Everything was about trying to communicate to the readers that we believed what we were saying, for all of its lunacy and bombast and, Jarro and wearing, on a Harley's cowboy hat, riding a, crazy mutant hyena, all that stuff, all the kind of ridiculousness that we love, that Greg and I adore about comics, was also wrapped around a message that mattered to us. And then in the whole time that we worked on the event, this, I'm totally talking out of school, but it's the truth. The environment was so volatile, not just in the real world, where obviously it matters a lot more, where, COVID hit and we were worried about friends having work. And so we were, people we cared about and people that we had promised work. And so it was about creating material without it being too much. But even in DC itself, beyond COVID, it was a crazy ride, in the last 2-3 years, where there was a prescription of what they were going to do on the other side of it for a while, that changed a bunch of times. And then it got pushed back, what was on the other side of it. So when it was 5G, and So it was a lot of volatility, and sticking to that one thing that was like, it's always going to be about this and we're not changing it. It felt like you were flying a plane sometimes through this like crazy electrical storm. And it was like, if I could just land this plane, I know I'm not changing course. I will fly through this crazy ass storm. And so I'm really proud of how it came out all around, you know, and I'm really happy they let us do so much story, you know, leading up to it. I mean, we weren't planning on doing like Year of the Villain stuff or any of that. It was supposed to start right after Justice League. But a lot of the stuff that came out of it that seeded some of the great things happening now, I'm just so happy other people got to play with and build off of. And I believe deeply, and then I'll shut up, about in Marie Javins, who edited Metal, and who's now the captain of the ship at DC, you know, edited the first Metal along with the great Tay Taylor, who's now at Vault Comics, and Mark Doyle. And then she edited Justice League as well with them. So she's been my person, like my go-to person for 3 or 4 years. She's one of my closest friends, like in the real world. And she's been someone who has had such a good vision for DC for a long time. She's been in the industry 20 plus years, Marvel, DC, everything. You know, she's pretty well universally loved. But her vision of what DC could be was always really confluent with ours, you know, with Metal, in terms of making sure that we were being aggressive about trying new things, and at the same time really making sure we weren't jumping shark and still had really good pillars of classic storytelling with core characters and all that stuff, like a blend. And so it was about taking the best of the New 52, the best of Rebirth, and trying to do something that was our own, you know, for this moment. And so once Marie was installed, you know, as the head 6 months ago or whatever, it really came together where it was like, not only can we land this plane the way we want, but on the other side, there'll be a whole fleet of planes taking off in the same sort of spirit of this, where we all believe the same thing. You know, it's not going to land and then it's going to, because there were times when it was like Metal's going to end and we're flipping a switch, like the switch, and whatever happens on the other side is up to you guys. And if it's something that we totally disagree with, we'll still be supportive. You know, I'm not going to go out there and be like, no, but I can't have my story's meaning change to support yours. I'll just be supportive, like publicly. If they crash and my story says, with Greg and them, if our story says, hey, respect the past to build something this, and you do something that wipes everybody's memory on the other side, go for it. You know, it's up to you. It's your characters, but I'm not gonna, I won't change what we're doing to support that, because it's been the same thing since I pitched it in 2017, you know? So it was a lot of back and forth, and there was a lot of fluidity and a lot of screaming matches here and there. But I think ultimately, it was all because people are passionate about comics and believe what they were trying to do. Nobody was doing it in bad faith. It was just difference of opinion, I think, about what we needed to do. And I'm really, really happy with how it came out overall. So I'm very grateful to you guys and everyone for giving us, like, you know, the kind of exit stage left that we had really been hoping for.
Well, it's a story that's had so many moving parts, but like you were saying, you know, it lands the airplane the way that it's supposed to. And it couldn't have happened that way without so many great creative partners, you know, James, Josh. Uh-huh. But, you know, one guy that's really been with you from the beginning has been Greg Capullo. And to my knowledge, and I mean, this might be the last time we see you work with him for a while. Was it bittersweet ending that era with him, or can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't, I mean, it's bittersweet only in that we're going to, you know, this marks like a break for both of us from DC. You know, I'm still on the Infinite Frontier stuff, which I help plan with Josh and James and a bunch of other creators. And I can talk about that too in a minute if you want a little bit of more of a tease of it. But
yeah, sure.
But ultimately, with Greg, I mean, Greg and I had been planning on doing death metal for a while. We had just come off last night, and we were just in a moment together where we were really kind of inspiring each other by letting each other just breathe a lot on the page. So this one was the most freedom for both of us, where I was like, Greg, you know, he gives story ideas, I give like visual ideas sometimes, and it was such we have such a shorthand at this point. It's like, and I talk to him all day. Like, I mean, I talk to him every day almost, like, you know, all the time. I was just texting with him right before this to see if he wanted to have a virtual drink later and catch up after I get back from dropping my mother-in-law. And he was like, he was like, I'm wiped out and playing with the sugar gliders, going to bed. So it was like, all right. But he, with this, we also, you know, we really were making plans on what we were going to do next, because I didn't want to stay and do stuff without him right now at DC. I have some things I'm still doing at DC without. I have a Nightwing project, and I have a
Don't tell Tom Taylor.
No, it's not. It's not.
Get jealous.
It's a black label thing. It's not at all like.
Intriguing.
Tom's amazing, and you know, he's gonna kill it. I know, and I was talking to him about his plans just a few days ago, and they're amazing. Like, he's gonna do so well on that book. So nothing. Tom's a friend, and I would never step on his toes. But and there's so many people coming in, by the way, I'm so excited about, from, you know, Ron B being elevated, and Joelle Jones doing Yara, and Becky Cloonan coming in with Michael to do Wonder Woman as well. And it's just up and down. There's so many people, that Jeffrey Thorne, a lot of people I'm excited about. And what James has planned on Batman, by the way, is amazing. And that guy I'm so crazy proud of. And Josh, what he's doing, I totally wasn't supposed to say it, and then I said it in an interview and let it out of the bag, so I'm just gonna say it anyway now, because who cares? But he's doing a series, like, it's basically called Infinite Frontier, and ours is the 0 issue we're all doing together to show everybody a tour of the universe. But then on the other side of it, he picks up the pieces that we teased at the end of Death Metal. Who's alive, who's dead, who's missing, why, they're all this kind of the secret planets, the stuff that we hit, and that moves forward there, the totality. So there's a big spine story happening with that. It's going to build to something for 2022 in a really big way, end of 2021 into 2022. So that's cool. But with Greg, I mean, what we decided we'd do is, like, we just said to each other, what do you want to do after this? And I was like, look, man, this is the truth. Like, I'm not getting any younger. You know, we had with the baby, you know, he had a big health scare after he was born. He needed like a full-on craniotomy, and he had to recover for that. And it just, between that and COVID, it was one of those things where you were just like, I love what I do. I love DC, and I love it more than ever. With, like, you know, there are people I wish were still there that aren't there anymore. Mark Doyle, and I'm still really close with Dan. As much as we butted heads, but and a lot of other people, but I've been doing superheroes for 10 years, and I've had so many books that I've been tinkering with on the side. I had about 8 or 9 books that I was slowly doing with creators like Francis Manapul and Raphael on the side of American Vampire, and Jock on the side of, you know, witches and all the stuff we did. And Greg and I have one too. And so I was just like, look, let's just do it. Let me see if I can figure out a way to get funding. Doing the Kickstarter did a huge amount for me with that. You know, and then optioning the movie rights. Not that we make a lot of money from it, but optioning the movie rights for a couple things, for Witches again, and for Undiscovered Country, and getting the gig to write the screenplay for that. It all wound up being like, okay, I can afford to do these books. You know, it's still hard. I can't pay all the artists consistently without funding. So I had to go to a couple places like Foreign Rights and be like, hey, what if you do a lot of like kind of hustling to try and be able to do them. But now I'm able to do them. And I went to Greg and I was like, look, man, I want to do a line of books, and I want to be able to announce them in like spring of summer 2021. Just be like, boom, here are all the books that I've been talking about and tinkering with, and now they're ready to go summer, fall, winter, like 8 to 9 books, you know? And so a bunch of them already have 30 or 40 pages drawn. And now he wants to do a creator own too. So it was just perfect, where I was like, all right, let's finish this big stuff up. Let's work on our own creator own, and let's make something together for the first time. So it was super bittersweet in the way that, like, we don't have tremendous plans to, I still have DC plans. So, you know, and I can't speak for Greg. One project, which is kind of teased a little bit in Metal, the non-Nightwing one, I I'd love for him to do, but I don't know if that'll be in the cards, just in terms of what he wants to do. He wants to do the Creech also, which I'm helping him with. Story-wise, it's great. His third act to that whole thing is terrific. It's really fun. So at the end of the day, it's more just I'm just thrilled to be able to let other people have some oxygen at DC, see new talent come up. You know, I believe in that stuff. I taught for 4 or 5 semesters there to try and do this, like let other people come in and get a crack at doing their dream stories on these characters. So I know Marie's the right person to shepherd it. So it feels like leaving for a while, at least for 6 months, whatever, at a time when it's in really good hands, and I'm excited to see what people are making. So it wasn't really that bittersweet, only in that, I guess when I think about it, just because Greg and I knew we were going to do something together anyway, that it was ours, and I was excited to get to it because it's an idea I've been having in my head that I think is like really perfect for him, with kind of like Saturday morning cartoon, but R-rated with a lot of gore and stuff. It's fun.
Well, I mean, Greg is a very, very metal artist, even without having done this series or its predecessor. So that probably will suit him well.
Yeah, it's designed for him. It's going to be good.
Cody, Nick, Mike, do you guys want to jump in, ask some questions?
Can I ask you kind of like a more of like a technical interpretation question?
Yeah, sure. Anything.
One of the first things that I was talking about when we started the show was how it appears to me that with the way you left things off, retcon is no longer a word in our vocabulary for the DC universe, right? If everybody remembers everything, then everything is valid, everything is canon, and everything can be revisited, tweaked, tell stories about that. Am I reading that right? Is that's
an expansion of Grant's idea that it all happened. I mean, for me, the idea of it not just having happened, but it meaning something in the way that it's tangible again, like it existed.
Right.
Even if it happened and you know, in the other version it happened, but they forgot it. Now they remember it. Anything can be acknowledged. And one of the things that I liked about Future State, and when it was, you know, Future State was initially being planned as kind of some of the best stuff that was part of what we were going to do as the initiative that was 5G. But then editors had worked really hard making some good stuff for that, even though the entire initiative as a whole was not something that I thought was, it was a very extreme kind of version of things. And so it was more a matter of, a lot of us believed that if it was done in a more tempered way, it would work. But when it sort of went away after Dan left, I think some of it was, a lot of this is really good and we want to build towards some of it, you know? And so it was, the editors found some parts of it they really loved, and they built Future State as glimpses of things that could happen. And then we found ways of making sure that some of those things are going to come to fruition in 2021 into 2022, but not necessarily in the ways you see them in Future State. It might not be that, you know, Tim Fox is Batman the way that he was in the next Batman or is in the next Batman. It might be slightly different, without not giving anything away, because maybe it'll be exactly the same, but maybe it won't. But the, you know, Superman, what's happening with Warworld, that could build to that, but maybe it'll happen differently. You know, all that stuff. It's like, so the idea was, you know, that we'd be able to kind of give glimpses and stuff of the future, and then kind of come back and be able to plan something like Infinite Frontier as a way of showing what we were about, you know, what we wanted to do going forward, all of that and everything, you know. What did you ask initially? I totally got lost in my answer. I forgot.
I was just kind of asking if that's an idea that everything is canon.
Oh,
now.
yeah,
Like,
right.
everybody remembers everything.
Sorry, I completely went down a rabbit hole of my own making. But yeah, the idea, the reason I was getting into Future State is that the same, like some of the stuff that you see in Future State will happen, won't happen, but everything you saw in Metal is relevant. Like everything happened to the characters, and everything that says they remember everything. Now, if, for example, James wanted to do a story that, you know, harkens back to Detective Comics #7, or harkens back to, you know, Nightfall, or, you know, any of it, Like any story, Gotham Central, like anything that was kind of in continuity at some point, not like Elseworld stuff. Like Red Sun is not remembered by Superman because it didn't happen to Superman. It happened on another planet. But everything that happened on our planet Earth, you know, or you know, pre-crisis, all that stuff. Like every story that happens in the comic book Superman from the beginning to now, or action from here now, is within his memory for a writer to use or not. So the idea is for it to open up almost the total plurality of stories from the past for writers to feel comfortable and excited to revisit and use in new and modern ways, the way Grant was, I think, so good at, if they want. And if they don't want to, you don't really have to acknowledge any of it, but it's there. Like it's not just like, you can't just make up a new past, you know what I mean, for your character. You can't just be like, well, actually Harley's origin is this, because no, it's what you know what it is. It's remembered as these ones that happened. So it's that, you know, unless you have some reason that you can make up in a story with the editorial that makes it make sense. So that's the point, is to kind of ground the history, and the messaging in it is to tell readers everything you've ever loved matters, you know. If you read one story 20 years ago, that story counts. You know, you're a fan if you read one comic book. You're a fan if you've read 1,000 comic books. Like, we care about all of you. We're all in it together as lovers of this industry that's, you know, gone through a really tough, challenging period. And a lot of us worry about it on multiple levels, you know, of course, like distribution, retailers that we care about, you know, journalists, all of it. Like, it's a really volatile, nutty time. And I think a lot of us are looking for ways to kind of figure out how to make things work together as opposed to being seen as competitive, whether that means being progressive in comics in terms of trying radical stuff with characters, brand new generation characters, all that stuff. And, you know, very classic meat and potatoes kind of stories. Those things don't have to be at odds. There's a way of doing all of it together and making sure that you're serving everybody. The same way I don't think digital and print have to be so at odds. I think digital, there's a way to make digital a special format where you get one thing, and then print another format where you get something wildly different. And in that way, both can serve a purpose that I think complements the other. You know what I mean? But I think we're too used to being siloed in these different areas of comics, saying, well, that's, you know, that's this kind of, you know, digital isn't should just be a distribution arm. Otherwise it's competitive, you know, so keep the price point the same as the print and give the exact same package. Or, you know, manga is different. It should be over here and this and that, or anime is, to me, we have to start rethinking all of those things to be able to be like, you know, everything is part of an omniverse of story. And that doesn't mean that there are multiple versions of our characters within the DCU, that meaning within our Earth that have it means you can, as long as their history exists, you can pull from it to do a story going forward. But the same way you could create a whole new universe in digital that doesn't necessarily touch it, you know, and services a different crowd. And those things are can happily coexist, you know, all that. The idea is to be able to stop thinking of it in different binary terms of having it have to be like, you like this or you like that. You're either, you know, you either want this or you want that, or this kind of story can only be told here or here. It has to be like, it's all comics, you know, and the only way we're going to really thrive is if we kind of embrace all of it and make each part of it special in a way that shows why it can all be one ecosystem, you know? I know it sounds like really like lovey-dovey and whatever.
No, it doesn't, because I think one of the important things that it does is it does away with gatekeeping. You know, that was the first, when you mentioned, you know, having read one comic versus 1,000, that was the first thing that came to me was, you know, some of the more toxic segments of fandom. They're like, well, you're not a real Batman fan if you haven't read Arkham Asylum, or, you know, whatever. That sort of toxic culture has just gotten so out of hand, and I feel like you guys really deserve applause for taking steps, meta and otherwise, to tear down that kind of gatekeeping and saying, hey, you know what, guy that hasn't read a comic since 1986, your stuff is cool. Guy that started reading comics in 2011, your stuff is, I really applaud you guys seeing that as an issue and taking steps to address it.
Thanks. I mean, I'm trying to put my money where my mouth is with it, with both death metal in terms of, like I was saying, with the messaging, that's kind of the subtextual messaging and the way we organize the event itself, and the way it goes into Infinite Frontier, which really, I think, puts, our DC money where our mouth is with metal, in the way that we have a lot of, it shouldn't be lost on people that the cover to Infinite Frontier is done by, is underlyingly done by Andy Kubert, and then has all of the newer artists. I don't even know, I hope this is released, but it has like a big wraparound cover by Andy Kubert, and then over his layouts, we have all the new artists drawing. And that's the, you see what I'm saying? The message is this, and I mean, sorry, Dan Jurgens. I said Andy Kubert, but it's Dan Jurgens, my bad. I love Dan. Sorry, Dan. But anyway, the point is, somebody who's a superstar who represents comics legacy, inviting in new people to do their takes on the kind of skeletal aspects that he's building there. You see what I mean? So everything is trying to say the same thing, that we're in it together. We can't be at odds with each other. We have to try and meet this moment in a way as an industry that tries new things as well. It doesn't mean abandoning things that we've loved in the past. I mean, but it's my wife's gonna murder me if I don't go back there and get her mom to the plane. But I'm very passionate about this, mom-in-law. What I'm trying to say is that one of the things I'm most excited about this period of my career, and I was just talking to Marie this morning, and I said to her, like, I'm here for anything you need. We're friends. If you ever want, you call, like, put me in coach wherever you need me. But I'm over here for a few months doing my stuff. And one of the things that I was excited about doing Best Jacket, the way I'm doing it, is that I don't have it at any one publishing house. You know what I mean? I don't have it at Image, which I love Image to death, but I don't have it at, Comixology. I don't have it at Dark Horse. But I have multiple, I'm trying things in all kinds of ways. I'm going to try and do something Panel Syndicate, try and self-publish one thing, have some things at Image, have some things digital, have all of it. So my goal is to try and show with my own work that it's worth trying, taking risks or taking on different challenges. So if a story fits a format, go with that format. One of the stories is more prose. It's this one with Jock. Okay, well, maybe we find a way of making a deal where we can do it so it has a prose component with more of a book publisher. It has an Audible but is still released in comic shops. How do you find ways? How do you find ways of making the lanes that you're driving in actually parallel, like that instead of them seeming to drive away from each other, that I see it with my kids. My kids love anime, manga, all this stuff, and they find their ways into comics differently than we did, and they expect different things. And yet you can get them hooked. Like my 9-year-old fell in love with the X-Men through Fortnite, and it made me so overjoyed to have his stocking for Christmas be full of X-Men books. And I'll show you, he has a Weapon X statue on his thing. I got him the Marvel Premier Diamond one where he's the helmet on, and I bid on eBay and won for a couple $100 the Hulk Wolverine statue, and that's on his thing too. So they find their way in through different things, and then they love the same things that we loved. But you can't just rely on the things that we loved to be all there is. You have to also try things like that feel like they're for them. He's excited to read digitally and have a whole different world of characters and different risks taken in order to do this. So that's all I'm saying, is that my goal for 2021, honestly, is I'm so happy with the stories, the things I'm working on, and I'm so proud of what DC I think will be. My hope is to live up to the things I would like to be a part of in a good way in the community, like that, making books the right way, being able to, go to sleep at night feeling like you're trying things that you believe in, to say, it's time for us to try and think boldly about how we can help the whole industry at once, as opposed to one area, just direct market, just digital, just DC, just Marvel, all of it, you know. Like, let's do a crossover. Let's do whatever. All of it, you know. Anyway.
Well, Scott, I know you got to run, and I'm going to ask you a really simple question before you go. And thank you so much for your time. Who is your favorite metal band?
Oh man, honestly, Dio. Greg got
me. Hey, he gave us this.
The first, I know, the first Holy Diver, Rainbow in the Dark. You know, it was like I just couldn't. It was like Greg because it was one of the first things Greg got me hooked on, because he was like, oh, he was telling me about the concerts and everything. But I mean, he got me into so much, from like modern ones like Mastodon and Gojira to back to, you know, Maiden and Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and everything. So,
oh man,
he's a good mentor, right?
He's led you well. Well, Scott, thank you so much for dropping in. Tell your mother-in-law we're sorry for having kept you over.
No worries. She's chill. She's awesome. So she's
okay.
But let's do it again when I start having like Nocterra or other things coming out in a few months, or when I announce more of the indie stuff, I'd love to come back and talk to you again.
Yeah, we'd love to do that, man.
Sounds wonderful, right, Scott. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It has been Scott Snyder. And now it is not Scott Snyder. It's just us again. So, what more is there to say?
Well, that didn't suck.
No, I didn't.
And I was so interested because Scott Snyder had a lot to say, and I was really super excited to kind of chime in and ask what that next step was for Snyder in making comics more accessible and what it looks like now that Snyder is kind of done with superheroes, and he went right into it.
Yeah, he actually, like, a lot of the mental questions I had prepared, he just answered on his own.
Yeah,
right? You know.
Wonderful. A new respect for Snyder as kind of a master of comics and an industry and where it's going in the future. And if you've listened to the show at all, you know I favor digital comics, and I always love when somebody gives some love to digital comics and kind of what it means for the industry and just how expansive it is outside of these fun events at DC that you go to your local comic shop and pick up. Comics are a lot more than that, and it looks like Snyder has tapped into a huge view of comics. So what an exciting future.
Oh, absolutely.
Just his view and his explanation on, you know, gatekeeping, and it doesn't matter. I mean, who gives a damn if, you know, when's the last time you read a comic, how many comics you read, what you read, you know, who cares if they're digital? You know, stop yelling at the clouds and enjoy the medium for what it is. You know,
it's so true, because honestly, like here at Comic Watch, we get a lot of people who are interested in what we do and love comics, but a lot of them are put off by how intimidating comics are. And we have a lot of people who want to write for us. Even it's just intimidating. Like I haven't read 30, 40 years worth of comics, so I don't know if like my fandom is up to par. And it's always this fight to be like, it's just as valid as anybody who's read anything, and it's just as important. And it's great to see stories that reflect that finally, that you can tangibly point to and say, you know, this is a validation of any fan of comics as a medium, as an industry.
Yep.
I think
it's called being a good steward of the industry.
Yeah.
And it really does my heart good when people like Scott Snyder, you know, prominent people in the industry like Scott Snyder, not just, you know, little guys like us, are you know, speaking truth to power where that sort of thing is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the coolest things he said the whole time, and he said a lot of cool shit, was that that he was looking forward to giving people space to breathe, because we really have seen a DC Comics for the last 20 years that has been dominated by the Jeff Johns, the Scott Snyders, to a lesser degree, I'd say, like James IV,
Morrison,
Mark Waid, has had his moments, and you know, now Bendis is here. So I mean, there's been a lot of domination of the narrative, and now what we're seeing with Future State is that, okay, we've fixed all the stuff we screwed up, and now we're going to step back and let this new generation, you've got the Steph Phillipses, you've got Vita, Ram V, like this whole new wide generation
Mm-hmm.
is stepping in. Mike and Becky, like I can't wait to talk to Mike and Becky about Wonder Woman. That's gonna happen. At Jesus, Steve Orlando. Maybe Steve Orlando will get some respect at DC for a change.
Right.
Like, there's just there's so many possibilities and so many younger creators. Cinna's got some work on a digital Wonder Woman series coming. It's just it's so exciting to see these people get to play with their heroes.
Yeah.
I mean, and look what's happening with DC and their digital. I mean, you've got the Steph Phillips sensational Wonder Woman. You've got these cool initiatives that are expanding, and it's drawing you to DC's digital publishing lineup just as much as Future State is getting you into your local comic shop to see what's going on there. And what a great approach. And it looks like DC's opening up, like you said, and giving people room to breathe. Like that's the answer, right? It seems like. And
yeah, just let these creative voices do their thing.
Right.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
What a radical concept.
Novel idea.
But look at what it took to get to that point. I mean, talking about all this with death metal and going back to Batman, like so much narrative work, and then hearing Snyder talk about kind of butting heads with Dan in the back and things behind the scenes where it was 5G and then it wasn't, and it's kind of back and forth, but him wanting to keep this plane going straight. There's been a lot of kind of, it sounds like, tribulations getting to this point of what feels like a simple concept to just let creators do their thing. But in the comics medium and in what the DC universe is, that's not something you can just snap your fingers and do. And like getting an insight on what it takes to get to that point is just crazy interesting. And like Snyder is, even in just a few minutes, just kind of like what an intellect for the comics industry. Cool stuff.
Absolutely. And, knowing that he's got all these various projects on the boil too. I mean, geez, I think we could have spent a whole episode just talking about Undiscovered Country.
Yeah. Option for an adaptation now. So
yeah,
speculators, pick up your comics now.
Absolutely. Well, guys, do you have any final thoughts on death metal or our talk with Scott Snyder or anything like that?
I kind of wanted to give a shout out because I always feel like death metal really overshadowed Endless Winter as an event also at DC, and Mars was doing some cool work, a lot of cool artists. And I'd love to give a shout out to Endless Winter because not only was death metal cool, if you read Endless Winter, it was a fun time and a couple of cool events for DC, right?
Yeah, Dan Abnett and Ron Mars, they wrote the hell out of that fun little story. They did. It's a very meat and potatoes superhero story, but sometimes that's just what you want.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's fun. Have fun reading it. For sure. I actually, I started off, I think I reviewed like the first 4 or 5 chapters, and then I got bogged down with other things. So I actually haven't read the second half of the story, but it's good. There's a lot of good character beats, and it's just, our heroes fighting ice monsters. I mean, cool. But I think it's safe to say that DC has a very clear roadmap for where they want to go 2021 and beyond. And we're going to be hearing from a lot of really smart, intelligent, different voices from them in the near future. And some of those voices might show up on this program. Oh, hey, crazy. Of course, none of it would be possible without some of our sponsors. Frankie's Comics, Carson's Corner, and I didn't butcher it this week. And
so proud.
Lemon Drop Comics.
Lemon Juice Comics. You almost got
it. I keep saying Lemon Drop. They're going to drop us. But they're our sponsors, and they rock. And we thank them for their support. So this has been a crazy fun episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Cody, for making time to be here, and also for making the Scott Snyder thing happen. If I don't think we give Cody enough props, but he's the guy that, he went from being the original organizer and host of the show, and he brought me in and Nick in, and got this whole ball rolling, and now he's kind of moved on to this different role, more behind the scenes, where he's schmoozing and rubbing elbows with folks in the industry and actually getting us the opportunity to talk to people like Scott Snyder. So Cody, thank you so much for everything that you do for us.
It's my pleasure. I'm very likable.
Yeah, but you are. Despite the fact that you're a Florida Gators fan, but
sports reference.
But thank you all so much for listening. We will be back next week for more shenanigans with Christopher Cantwell of Iron Man and Dr. Doom and Halt and Catch Fire fame. So until then, support your local comic shop, read something, and be good to each other. Thank you so much for listening.